Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. So today I spent an hour with John Corey, a very interesting guy, has his own London networking event, which has gone online recently. Something that he talks about a lot is tech. That's his background, having worked with Steve Jobs at Next, and understands finance, crowdfunding, FCA regulation. We talk about crypto. Just generally an experienced guy who's got very, very fascinating views on a bunch of stuff, property and finance related. So hope you enjoy. As always, if you like what you see, like, share, and enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Property People. Today, I'm joined with Mr. John Corey. Now, John was actually the initial the maiden interview for Property People. I actually ran this idea by him as some sort of consultancy to make sure I wasn't going crackers, and he actually gave me a lot of good advice. And here we are, a few years later, we're still doing it. And I'm very pleased to have John finally again, because I messed up the audio the first time. But just very quickly, John has.
So I was the maiden one that didn't get released. So you could say I was the practice run.
You were the practice run. Actually, funny story. So I was not sure if the batteries on the audio on the microphone was going to run out or not. And you said, let's see what happens. And lo and behold, it did run out. And I learned that lesson the hard way. And you're good at that, actually, teaching those kinds of lessons, John, from the people that I know that have spent much time with you. But I certainly haven't made that mistake again twice. But you are famous, John, for owning properties in multiple time zones from Hawaii to Bradford, and hosting your own monthly London networking event, and being extremely active where property meets technology, commonly known as PropTech. You started out in technology with a very, very interesting story. So if you don't mind, but before we actually go into that, we go there, I want to go back a little bit further and find out who John Corey was at school. Did you always knew that you were going to be in the technology industry? Did you always know that you'd end up in England doing property events? What kind of person were you at school? Were you studious, or were you?
Simple answer to the first one. First two were no. I don't think I was thinking along the lines of future at that point. So I went to a parochial school locally. You walk to school, you go to class, and all the rest of it. I was okay in some things, and I was very good in some other things. And in particular, I have some sort of learning disability, whatever that means, when it comes to spelling. So as my fifth grade teacher told my mother, he would be number one in the class if it wasn't for spelling. So he's fifth in the class. And I would get like 1 right out of 25 in a spelling test. And then I'd have to spend the weekend writing all 24 that I got wrong 50 times each or something. It's like, oh my God. So I did fine with math or whatever you do as a child. I did fine with science, didn't think much of it, couldn't sing worth beans, maybe tone deaf, wasn't particularly into sports in a like superstar sense. I just played with the other kids, right? Found out later that I have a depth perception issue, which means that I don't see certain objects as they're traveling very well. So if it was something to do with catching a ball, I would have a problem with that, because maybe I'd see the ball, then I wouldn't see the ball, then I'd see the ball, but it was too late to react. It was, so and that also meant that I couldn't be a U.S. Marine Corps pilot, because depth perception is a bit of a problem in fighter jets.
Indeed.
So there were little things like that you have your bumps along the way. I used to like riding my bike and all that stuff. So then I graduate from 8th grade, as we would say, and going off to American high school. And at the little sort of graduation ceremony, I got called up for the science award. I had gotten a 99 for the year out of 100. It's like, oh,
Wow.
okay. Had no idea I was doing that well. You know, I was just doing what I was supposed to do, more or less. High school, I wasn't in the top tier. I was like the tier just below that. Smart, but not super smart. Enjoyed certain topics. It generally evolved and came out that it was math or it was science, sort of the hard science rather than soft, psychology or anything else.
Yeah.
And I was still weak in spelling or things. So ran track, rode bicycle, whatever, nothing special. Go off to, I figured out by the time I got out of high school, I wanted to be some sort of engineer. Thought I'd be a mechanical engineer because I had this fascination with the auto industry. I did a little bit of programming in high school, so that would have been in the 70s. Then I did some more programming at university, and I switched from mechanical engineering to computer science. And that really came down to, I remember one class I was in, and it's like, okay, this is not going so well. And at the same time, I enjoy not having physical real world constraints. And with software, it's a virtual world, anything's possible. It might be slower than whatever because the machine can't do the simulation or something, but it's not like physics where there's a reality out there, and as much as you want to believe you can warp time, well, you can't. So
Yeah.
at least in computer science I could, and that's where I got into computer science. Went off to Silicon Valley, got started in real estate investing. Off the back of that computer science work at Silicon Valley, ended up in London. So
Interesting. So how did the career really started to grow in technology, went up to Silicon Valley, and you've worked with a few interesting people and companies. I know, for example, you were one of the beta testers of LinkedIn, which has recently become my favorite social media platform. And it's taken me some time to get there, but I'm on it probably a lot more than I am any other platform. But you've also worked with people like Steve Jobs in the past, right?
yes. So I'm of a certain age, and Steve Jobs, if he was alive, would have been, or was then at least, 3 years older than me. So I'm of a certain age group. And when I got to Silicon Valley, there were no digital maps to speak of. There was no cell phones. You shared a computer. You didn't necessarily have your own. PCs were a relatively new concept, 1, maybe 2 years. So it was mini computers, large mainframes, whatever. There were no networks, local area networks. There's a lot of stuff that we have today that you didn't have then. So that meant that I graduated degree computer science focused on operating systems. And then after starting for Hewlett Packard in Silicon Valley, I ended up also attending Stanford AI. So I did all the AI classes at Stanford. And this is back way before anybody thought AI was cool. And there wasn't that much data around. The Google guys hadn't even arrived on campus yet. Social media, the people came up with that phrase, I don't think they were born yet. So I was paid in 1982 to be online as part of the day job. It wasn't like social media, big deal. It was like, no, this is how you're going to communicate with a few other people. Because I was one of the people that designed the HP operating system, HPUX, so the Unix operating system for them. There was a lot of other people that became famous and did stuff and started companies. And so after 8 years there, a friend had left to go to this new company, relatively new, and it was called Next because we didn't know there's a retailer in the UK. So it was Steve Jobs' next company after Apple because he got kicked out. So I started working there, and I had a boss named Alan. He had a boss named Daniel, and Daniel was one of the co-founders with Steve. Well, Daniel quits, Alan steps down, and so then I have now a direct relationship to Steve because he's my direct boss. Before that change of management, I was running the IBM project. It was pretty much the largest client project we had. They were paying us a lot of money to license the software. So I was running that because I was particularly good at dealing with clients. And that meant I had a dotted line to Steve before I had a hard line to Steve. And I also had a dotted line to head of software because I was the interface from the company to IBM, and ran the team that we had at IBM. And that's where I met a summer intern who later does another company, gets his degree at MIT, gets his degree at Stanford, all this other stuff, and becomes the first CTO for LinkedIn as a co-founder. And that's where a number of us from Next were beta testers, because we knew Eric. And Eric said, hey, we need some help. Can you help us out? So my LinkedIn ID is something under 3,000. So, been there when it started.
Very interesting. And you're clearly surrounded by bright minds, and, shaping the forefront of technology and the way that the world interacts with each other. So what brought you into property? And, where did the property investment and interest come into it?
So pause that for 1 second. I'll get that. There is a sort of funny tangent here. So Tim, a programmer, wanted to use Bill's software. And Bill had come up with the software because he told Steve, stuff we have is shit. I can do better. They negotiated. He was given 90 days to come up with his solution. He did. So that when the company Next launches its new computer, the Next Cube, Tim sees it. He works somewhere else and he's, I need one of those. I want one of those. His boss agrees, you could have one, but we're a government agency. We got to put something in the box. What are you going to do? So Tim Berners-Lee says he's going to help the physicists get their information out faster so he could use Bill's software. You and I have the web because Tim wanted to use Bill's software. So then when I was working for a Swiss bank in London, I recruited Bill from Hawaii, moved him over to London so he could work at Next, work at Swiss bank. But he's the guy that invented a piece of software that then caused Tim to want to use it. That then caused Tim to give us the web. So let's go back to your question. 1983. So I started in 82, February of 82. So this would be somewhere around that year. I could go to bookstores, and there's a particularly nice bookstore in Cupertino at the time, and I could buy books and read what I wanted to read. So whether it's fiction or not, but no longer were you told you must read this, you must read it by this date. It's like, cool. So I go to bookstores. I had a bit of money. I could buy a book. They're like, oh, by the way, these are paper books. You have to go to the bookstore, pick them up. So there was a book called Nothing Down by Robert Allen. It was a New York Times bestseller back when you actually had to sell books to become a bestseller. And it was about how to buy real estate with no money down. And he made this topic sort of famous in the US. And so I read the book, and then I remember sometime later, I'm sitting it was daytime. I was upstairs at a girlfriend's place, sitting in the end of the bed. The TV was running. I don't know what, maybe she was cleaning or something. So I was upstairs for some reason. And there was a commercial, an infomercial. Infomercials were invented for the real estate seminar sector to fill cable TV time. So I'm watching this infomercial, and it's talking about Nothing Down. It's the book I read, and they're doing sort of the live version of it. Well, if you do this, you can become wealthy, and palm trees and all this rest in the background. And they say, we're going to be at the Red Lion San Jose Airport on such a date. If you want to sign up, we have operators standing by. Call now. So rush to the back, scarcity, right? This is like a 1-800 phone number. You have to call. You have to, and by the way, the phones are connected to the wall, right? Dial, rotary, or push buttons. And if you attend the live seminar where you'll get all this good information, you'll get a free cassette tape, 45 minutes aside. That was the gift for showing up, a cassette tape, if people know what that is. So I go to that, and the guy speaking says, there's 7 ways that you could do da-da-da-da-da, and let me cover 3 of them. And I'm thinking, cool, and I'm saying some notes. It's like, but what about the other 4? And then he goes, and we have 5 ways to do this, and let me show you 2. It's like, okay, but what about the other 3? And okay, I didn't see this coming, didn't know how this works. So, if you want to run to the back of the room and get out your credit card, we're going to be doing an all-day training for 2 days, actually, in San Francisco on such a weekend. So, okay, fine. And actually found about 2 years ago the receipt for that actual course. Yeah, I bought it. And I actually put the receipt with the manual, funny enough. So I go up on a Saturday and Sunday. This is a big deal for me. I have trained my boss that I don't get up and into work before 10 a.m. I have to be in San Francisco by 8:30, I think it was. This means it's a 70-mile journey. So I have to set an alarm to get up. I have to drive all the way up there and back. I don't have Google Maps. I don't have a smartphone talking to me. I have to look this up ahead of time. I have to call the hotel and ask them about parking. Okay. I have no idea where this is in San Francisco other than an address. You have to get out a paper map and try to figure it out. There's no website. Hotels don't have websites. They have phone numbers. So there's a lot of differences, but I get there. I sit there and there's maybe 20 people scattered around the room. And we're flipping through this stuff. And it's like, yeah, this is like what I read in the book. They sort of had taken the book and just made it, take the words out, leave more pictures, make it bigger. Okay. But I'm paying now 400 and something for it rather than maybe the 20 I paid for the book. But the guy, like, this is making sense. And oh, by the way, here's the funny part. There's no slides the way we think of it today. He's sitting on a chair on a little bit of a stage. He's got an overhead projection machine with him. He takes out his blue pen. He writes on the acetate, and then he cranks it to move it along. If he has to erase something, he sprays some stuff and smudges it out and then writes, or he just moves it forward. So that's live hand-drawn slides going through the manual. On Sunday, I'm thinking, this makes sense. I can do this. I'm going to go down to this realtor's office that I'm pretty sure is down the hill. I'm going to walk from where I live in Montessorino down to the hill to Los Gatos. It's about a mile away. There's got to be an office there. I'm pretty sure there is. So I do that on Monday morning. I walk in. There's an agent there. By the way, agents that work Monday morning are not the top agents. Top agents work nights and weekends, not Monday mornings. But anyway, we chat. He tells me some things. I tell him some things. He says, would you like to go view some properties? I say, yes. We go view some properties, 3 of them, because the way that the US system works, it's quite easy. I like the 3rd one. He says, well, should we go back and write it up? I say, yes. So we write it up. So then I drive into work at 2:00 in the afternoon. And then by 5:00, he calls and says, we've exchanged. You now are the proud owner of this property. We just have to do the completion because we don't waste time with this subject to contract bullshit. We just go straight to exchange.
That we in this country love.
Exactly. So that's the long version of the story.
And why did you say that the good agents only work nights and weekends and not Monday mornings?
Because they're paid on commission. They're not salary. When their buyers available, nights and weekends, because they have day jobs.
Yeah.
So if you want to work with buyers, you want to work with sellers, you want to get deals done, you have to see people when they're available in their homes. That's not prime time working hours. That's nights and weekends. These are 100% commission, no salary. You drive your own car, you pay your own devices, you pay for your own stuff. Yeah, very different.
Yeah, no, fair play. Because I haven't been an agent. I used to, the daytime was to create appointments. That's actually like you're hammering the phones and you're trying to get into people's homes on evenings and weekends to make sure that, or do the viewings on those times as well. But yeah, certainly you're hoping that people walk in the door during Monday morning that so you can create appointments.
Yeah, people don't walk in as much in the US, even back then, back in the Stone Ages. And also understand that every house has a lockbox when it's for sale with an agent. So the agent who has the listings put a lockbox on. So all the other agents can enter just by opening the lockbox, take out the key and wander in. They would probably call ahead to make sure no one's going to be home, but you don't want the owner to be home.
That's very true. It goes sometimes when the owner's home and they're baking bread, which is rare, and they've got all the answers, it does help. But certainly, this is a long time ago, or it sounds like when you're describing things like overhead projectors and rotary phones, and so you effectively in the modern day, this is effectively a marketing funnel where you have a lead magnet like a cassette tape, and they say come to the seminar, you run to the back. All of these sorts of concepts still exist, and you actually
they were invented long before the internet was invented. The internet just sort of repurposed the old stuff to new ways of delivering it. And curiosity, scarcity, all these human conditions, they existed long before there was any tech. So, the modern day internet marketeers confuse themselves sometimes and they think they invented all this stuff.
And so from all of that, you ended up buying properties in two places that are quite at the opposite end of the spectrum, what many would say. You've got
Yes.
Hawaii, which is this lush place where everybody dreams about retiring and getting married and going to spend all of their holidays, to Bradford, which is quite the opposite for most people anyway in their minds. So why these two places?
Well, most people outside the UK don't even know where Bradford is.
Exactly.
And I like to say, no Brit ever asked me why Hawaii. They always say, why Bradford? What you can see through some of my purchases are places that I've somehow been associated with. And whether that meant I worked there, whether that meant I visited there. Bradford in particular was more that I had a coworker at a digital online bank back when that was a new thing. And he was a property investor and I was a property investor. Well, he had done a deal with a developer who was repurposing a school. So there was some good deals to be had. So he was basically sourcing and I was fine with the location because the numbers made sense. So I tend to say to people, you should know the areas. I've almost always done that. Bradford, I probably knew the least. And at the same time, Bradford reminds me a lot of where I grew up as a kid. It's a mill town, the wool mill industry, that sort of thing. And it's seen better times. Well, where I grew up makes Bradford look good. So.
Wow. Where did you grow up out of interest?
Lawrence, Mass. So it's again one of these it's on a river, and that's how you powered the original mills from water power. So.
Well, the interesting thing is that you've bought these properties along the way. These are places where you've had some sort of interest and you've understood the market, and you've just picked up a little bit of real estate along the way. But you really your main focus or your main area of expertise, where I think that within the property industry that you kind of you very much niche in is two things really. One is big tech, and the other one is like FCA regulation, which I know that you speak a lot about publicly and have helped a lot of people. So if we were to talk about these two things and start with FCA regulation, where did that interest come from specifically? Because I know that, I mean, many people, they when they're in the property industry, they'll either go down construction or they'll go down the legal route or they'll go down finance like I have. Obviously the finance FCA regulatory part of the industry, many would consider to be the most dull or mundane potentially. What was it that really interested you to get up to speed with it in the way that you have?
So a couple of ways to answer that. One is it's a little bit of a side effect of working for investment banks. So when you're in the regulated finance industry, that's part of your day job is knowing the regulated finance issues. Second is when you're inventing the future, you have to look at where the gaps are and where the inefficiencies are or the friction, and what can you do and improve that. Now, the regulated finance industry is generally the lowest cost of capital because when you standardize and you make transparent and you make sort of pervasively available, then the cost of capital drops. The most expensive capital tends to be the stuff you have to individually negotiate. And the tightest margins are the exchange traded type products, and the fattest margins come from the over-the-counter or single deal negotiation. Now, what's happened over the years in tech? Well, we've gotten pervasive to the point where everybody's got a supercomputer in their pocket. So, you've got your iPhone or Android or whatever, and you've got access to everything. You got the web, you got all this stuff. And that's caused people to communicate. That's caused social media to pop up and all the rest of it. And people start doing deals, or they start talking to each other, and they start sharing information. And the regulators like, oh my God, they're breaking the law. They're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. This is literally a criminal act that they're participating in, and it's published online, and everybody, all the other criminals can see it, except none of them know they're criminal. So as normal things happen, the regulation tends to follow what's been going on, and what they say is we need to stop this or dampen it down, but you can't do that if you don't give people a way to channel that energy. So they create the sandbox called the Crowdfunding Regulations in the UK. US is actually behind the UK in this. So when you have this convergence of smart tech devices, prop tech, fintech, all that tech, and you also now have regulations that allow people to collaborate on financial deals but not break the law, well, that gives us an opportunity. And if you look at the property people, so property people can find deals. There's lots of courses on that. And some deals are shit, but a lot of deals are pretty good. And if they do their homework and they get rid of the bad ones and they sort of really think it through, they'll come up with a good deal. And when the person gets good at that, they start to find more deals than they have capital. So then they go to people like you. It's like, hey, I want to borrow some money. And what do the lenders say? That's great, deal stacks, okay. Where's the rest of the money coming from? And they say, what do you mean the rest? They're like, well, we don't do 100%. We'll do up to some limit, but we need to make sure that we don't lose our shirt by funding this whole thing. Because if we want to fund the whole thing, we'll just own the deal and make all the profit. We're a lender, we make a margin. So you say classically, maybe we'll do 65%, 70%. There's ways to sort of massage that to make it look like 100, but ultimately at the end of the day, we need to see some money in the deal and we don't want another loan, okay? So I say to people, if you get good at finding deals, the thing you're gonna run out of is the equity, the stuff the lenders expect you to have that's not debt. And while you can use Facebook and all this stuff, LinkedIn, to tell people, that's a regulated message. That's a regulated activity. You can get yourself into trouble. And would you like to have to find one person who has the right amount, or would you like to have your deal available for multiple people to give you smaller amounts, so then no one has control over you? The amounts they're putting in are small, and they're not going to completely freak out if your project's delayed because of COVID or something. And the lender is going to be happy because it's real equity, real cash above the debt. Well, that's tech meets real estate meets crowdfunding and the regulations. And that's the sweet spot that I've carved out.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned crowdfunding and the fact that, which I find interesting, that you say that the UK is a little bit more advanced or slightly ahead of the US at the moment. And crowdfunding has, over the last few years, I think started to get more and more popular. At the same time, the regulation, from what I know, has started to get a little bit more intense. One thing that pops up from time to time when I'm speaking to borrowers and developers that are looking at various funding solutions is that they worry that the crowdfunding doesn't have the funds on time. So if we show them a deal and we say we need to raise £1 million, how do we know that the £1 million is going to be there in the next 8 weeks when we really need it? And also, on the other side, I think one of the concerns from the crowdfunding P2P space is that when investors are making those investments, and these are generally retail investors, so not sophisticated, they're doing small tickets. The issue then is, how much due diligence is the crowdfunding platform doing to make sure that the project is as profitable as it's being advertised? And from what I understand, there's no FCA regulation, or there's no need for the crowdfunding platform to do any of that due diligence. They're literally just like acting as an introducer to both parties and a platform to be able to make the transaction happen. So on those two things, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's funny, you've gone down a particular rabbit hole. That's not how you raise equity. So I would say none of that applies, because I think that's the boring part that you shouldn't be using. So what you actually were describing is peer-to-peer lending, which is a form of crowdfunding. And what did we say a minute ago? You go get your loan and you need some equity. Well, peer-to-peer lending doesn't provide any equity. By their license, they can't. So they're a
Okay.
complete non-starter. It's a complete waste of time to even look at them. What they can do is provide the debt. Well, there's lots of good debt providers out there. You happen to be one of those people out there that can provide debt. Whether you're a good guy or bad guy, I don't know. But the point is, there's lots of debt providers out there. It's the equity people are missing. So when these people think crowdfunding, they think peer-to-peer, they think loan, they think this, they think all that. It's like, okay, you told me you need to haul 10 tons of gravel and you're asking about which Ferrari to put it in. It's like, it's the wrong conversation. So they're already wasting their time. To the other point, though, when it comes to due diligence, the FCA regulations are pretty explicit. The platform cannot provide financial advice. The platform cannot tell you if it's a good or bad deal. The platform must make it a fair and transparent way for people to understand what's being presented to them, but they can't really have an opinion about this is good or bad. So it would be against their license to tell you that we've done the due diligence and this deal stacks. They can just say, we've done our due diligence. We know that the person raising the money is who they say they are. We have seen the documents that they submitted that you're reading now. We have maybe seen some other documents that back up the claims they're making, but they don't have the ability to say this is a good deal and that's a bad deal. If they did, you could actually sue them if it doesn't go well. And that's not at all what they want, but it's also what the FCA is trying to let you run a marketplace when you're a license. They're not trying to let you run a bank where you're providing investor protection.
Yeah, so they're not allowed to. They shouldn't be making recommendations. All they're doing is marketing
Correct.
opportunities, and it's as they say in the crypto space, DYOR, is do your own research and make sure that you can come up with your own. I mean, is that?
So
I guess that.
that's
Yeah.
correct. Let's pause on that. So we have two types of crowdfunding: debt and equity. You should always do your own research, no matter whether you're a lender or whether you're investing equity into a deal. When you're the person raising the money, you should do your own research on, do I like this platform? Do I like this lender? Do I like this investor? Whatever. There's lots of, you should do your own research. The other thing is when you said the regulations are getting tighter on the debt side, peer-to-peer, that's where a lot of the losses have happened, yes. And it was quite loose. And part of the reason it was loose is it started outside of the FCA. It originally started with the OFT. It was a completely different thing. And then those two got merged under, well, FSA and OFT then merged that activity under the FCA. So the point of all that was that, yes, the regulations for peer-to-peer have gotten stronger. Largely, they've come in line with the equity crowdfunding. The equity crowdfunding was already sort of a leading light when it comes to the regulations, that side of it.
So just to make sure that I understood this correctly, so equity, you rightfully say that is the hardest piece, and the scarcest piece, and the piece that people run out of first. So if, for example, I was a borrower, I would be able to, oh, well, I had a project and I needed to raise £1 million of equity or £500,000 of equity. I could go to a crowdfunding platform and they would be able to raise, is that 100% of my equity, or would they be able to raise 80% of it, so I always had some skin in the game? Or does that just vary from crowdfunding platform to platform?
So under the regulations, equity crowdfunding platform can raise up to 8 million with a very lightweight document. Once you go above 8 million, then you're into the more regulated raises where you need an auditor or you need a lawyer and you need a bunch of other things. So if you think of it as 8 million of equity combined with the debt that you could raise, how big a project could someone do with that?
So, and then how does the crowdfunding platform
answer that question? So if I said I had 8 million of equity, what level of debt would complement that, such that how big a project could I do if I could raise 8 million of equity?
Well, it depends on the leverage that you've got on the debt. So if you've got a debt piece which was 90% LTC, then you could raise and you 80 million. 80 million, 90%, yeah, of debt.
So you could do fairly large projects off of equity raises. Do the platforms have a stable of investors who will fund anything? No. What you can do is you can create some of your own investors, because now you have permission to publicize the project to retail and above. So you don't have to worry about who's reading the information, because any person who's above 18 years old can participate. So therefore, it is legal to actually share the information broadly, promiscuously. Before those individuals could actually invest, they would have to go through a platform. They'll be asked some questions. They got to prove who they are. They need to view the document, a bunch of other things. So there's a funnel or a channel or a process by which the FCA knows Mr. and Mrs. Retail Investor or high net worth or sophisticated will get channeled so they can see the information before they make a decision, which means you can then publicize your deal very widely. You don't have to be super careful about making sure only exempt people see it.
So the crowdfunding platform gives people a license to effectively raise equity
Yes.
in a more open fashion, which if you
Yes.
try to do it privately, you wouldn't be.
Correct. You get two main things from a regulatory point of view. One is permission to promote your deal in a very explicit, controlled way. Second is you get permission to run a collective investment where you can have multiple investors investing in a pooled way into that investment. So collective investment scheme, CIS. So those two permissions are what the platform is letting you borrow for your project. And you're paying £750, and that's it to get both of those permissions for that project. If you are successful, you pay a success fee. It could be 3 to 7%, depending on the platform and how they structure their fees. But if you're not successful, there's nothing more you have to pay other than that $750 to get started.
Very, very interesting. What would you say as the biggest cost?
Well, let me flip it slightly. If you had borrowers, clients who have viable projects, they're actually quite good, and you can arrange the debt, but they don't have enough equity, and now you have a solution, what would that do to your business?
Boom. Blow it up.
Exactly. Right.
In a good way.
If I was a developer, if I was a project person or whatever, real estate investor, and I now knew that every time I find a good deal, I know I can get the equity and the debt stacked up. I can do more deals. I can decide how many deals I want to do rather than I keep running out of equity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what equity crowdfunding gives you.
And I mean, just a bit of color from where I sit actually within the industry. I'm constantly raising debt and equity for developers, and the debt is a lot more available. The equity is the harder piece to get, and equity is a lot more picky and choosy, especially because it's more scarce on who they're going to back and what projects they get involved in.
So here's another thing that flips that. So when you do a crowdfunded equity raise, you publish your terms and conditions, your offer, what rate you're going to pay, and it's a take it or leave it to the crowd. The people with the equity don't get to negotiate. They're either in or they're out. And I like to say, it's like you're driving the bus somewhere. The bus is going to go to this destination. Do you want to buy a ticket? Fine, buy a ticket, get in the bus. If you don't want to buy a ticket, piss off, move over, because the person behind you wants that seat.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. But without making this too much of an advert for doing it, I do recognize that everything in life has pros and cons, and there's always the costs and benefits. And if we were to say, crowdfunding, it gives you access to gives retail investors access to deal flow that they wouldn't necessarily have access to, and returns that they wouldn't have access to, and information and data that they can also educate themselves on how these deals work, get under the hood a little bit. All of those sorts of good benefits, I think, are coming from things like crowdfunding. What would you say would be some of the drawbacks, either to the mainly to the person that's borrowing it, I guess, or the person that's using it as a form of raising finance?
They'd have to be professionals. That couldn't just be schlocky shitheads that sort of duck and dive when the project doesn't go well. If the deal doesn't stack, they're going to get told. If the deal does stack and then they don't deliver, they're going to get told. If they can't communicate, because that means sending an email once a month saying how the project's going. If they blow it on all the basics, yeah, they're going to get found out.
Yeah,
And
I
I hope
guess.
that happens because I'd like to squeeze those fuckers out of the industry.
Yeah, I guess that's a good. That's one of the things about going public with everything that you do when you put your business on the line in front of everybody. Everybody sees the rise, but they'll also see the fall, and that fall could be quite a lot more heavy than if some people just do it behind the curtains and then they almost phoenix because no one really sees what's gone on beforehand.
Yeah, and like, let's be blunt. As if I haven't been. Property deals don't always go well. You know, stuff shows up late. Someone gets injured. The queen recognizes she lost a king, a relative in her ancestry, and it's buried under the car park. And we got to hold things while we go dig that bugger out. Right? There's all that sort of stuff.
You
So
got COVID
this
and
is not.
Brexit and
Oh yeah, I mean, and like the Italian guy that's trying to deliver the cabinets is stuck in the port, and you're now late, and the electrician's trying to show up, but the cabinets aren't there. There's all kinds of stuff that happens anyways. It's got nothing to do with crowdfunding. It's just got to do with normal development. The weather isn't always perfect for the delivery, or the winds are too high when you're craning something in. So you have to be realistic. You have to be honest with your investors. They're like, look, we have a schedule, we have contingencies. By definition, every budget that you look at as a good lender would say, you know, we have a contingency of so much for stuff that either we thought we had covered but we didn't, or things that weren't right, or things we had to adjust. So it's baked into the process that things will never be perfect. And what you're doing with crowdfunding on the equity side is it's a legal joint venture. You're going to share the profits, and you should put those profits to your passive investors ahead of yourself. So you're not even sharing equally in some sense, because you're saying, look, I said you'd earn this. I'm going to make sure you get that, even if I have to take less. Just like hosting a family event, you let your guests eat first. You don't run to the table and shove your face in the food in front of all your guests. You make sure they eat. Oh, have some more, you know, and then when they're leaving, you even give them some to take home, but you end up with all the leftovers. If you do this right, you will end up with the majority of the profits. If the project goes haywire and you don't do so well, that's not crowdfunding. It's just the project went haywire and you didn't do so well. Fine. But that's the life of a developer. You know, you got to own it.
I think people
it's an opportunity
more...
to also build a track record in a positive sense that we had trouble, we fixed it. The investors are happy. They're asking us if they can go around again. Well, now that's also very public. But there's a few people who are, you know, bankrupt 3 times or serving time right now, that or dead from drug abuse, among other things. You know, we could name who those people are. And most of that stuff dealt with, you never saw what was really going on. You never saw the detail. And now there's all kinds of investors out of pocket because they didn't know that they were getting into bed with someone that was like probably not the best choice.
Yeah, I do believe that generally people are quite forgiving if you've done everything along the way, because there's no reward without risk. So, you know,
Correct.
anybody that's making any kind of investment, whether it's £100 or £100,000 or more, they should understand that they are in a position where they are likely to lose all of that money. And I think people are forgiving as long as it's whilst things are not going to plan. Genuinely, people are doing their very best to try and make amends and trying to make things work, and 2, you know, not burying their head in the sand or disappearing, and you know they're keeping up regular communication. And
so then the good operators get rewarded and the bad operators get dinged, and the bad operators become good operators from their learning from their lessons, or they get out of the sector because they can't hide. You know, they can't just talk people into crap.
Absolutely. Now, you also, this is actually how we met in the first instance, through a networking event, your own London networking event, London-based networking event in Blackfriars. And how's that been over the last, let's say, 2 years or so? Because obviously we've not been meeting in public. Have you continued it? Are you discontinuing it? Have you seen an evolution to Zoom and these sorts of things?
So a few things, tech guy. So I was on Zoom probably 2 to 3 years before COVID. So it was like, okay, cool. Now everybody else is going to learn how to use it. This is great. I also live in more than one location, so the ability to deliver a meeting virtually is a positive on a personal level. But more specifically, so I was running a monthly meeting on the second Tuesday of the month for about 15 years, and it moved location over different periods. In Black Friars, I'd been probably not, I think I was there 5 years or something. In April, we stopped the physical meets and we went to virtual. And through some anecdotal evidence from my own, plus a professional that I know that's very good in this, they would say 80% of the meeting online or in the room is the same, and it's 20% that's different. And that's the tech and the touch. And funny enough, actually, some of the tech issues are more for the speaker than for the audience. There's a mortgage broker for a bridge lender who was saying once, it's really nice being able to just go up a few stairs to his loft to do the meeting and then head downstairs and be home, rather than the commute all the way through whatever it is, get in and out of London and all the overheads. So if 80% is the same and we look at that, then part of what they're saying is if it's content rich, being able to watch it from your own comfort, being able to take notes and maybe spread out a bit is a whole lot better than sitting in a cramped chair trying to type on your little phone or something. And then second of all, if it's the touch part, well, then maybe experiential events, residential events that have sort of a high touch element, maybe a meal or something, we can start to partition those, get your content, build your relationships, build trust, see people up front and personal, but you don't have to do that on a Tuesday night. And with my event, I've been able to now attract people to the event on a topic basis that are all across the country and outside of the country. I have people coming in from different countries to the virtual event. I would never get that on a Tuesday night at Black Friars at a nice hotel, but you still have to commute in and out. So I think the future is going to be not hybrid. I think it's going to be virtual for some types of content, some types of events, and then it'll be physical face-to-face in a time zone, in a location for those that can make it. And we're going to skew that towards nights and weekends, but it's going to be more around the weekend. It's going to maybe move around a bit. It's going to be experiential, whiskey tasting in Scotland, and let's go by the seashore for some other thing. Or, maybe there was a group that just did an event in the Algarve in Portugal. And so it'll be more location experience bonding. Content will be online is how I see it.
Interesting. So the networking events have done, I know a lot of people that have been to your networking events and they've enjoyed it. And it's good to know that they've been able to continue through Zoom. Another technological advancement that's helped not only the property industry, but, I think the whole world,
Exactly.
which is phenomenal. But there was one other topic that I also wanted to touch upon with you, which was the fast evolving crypto space. And I saw a post of yours recently on Facebook whereby you were asking for some engagement and some people to answer a few questions and thoughts that you had. I wanted to ask you about your perception on it, because some people say it's a big Ponzi scheme. Some people say it's a fad. Some people say it's the future of currency or asset value transfer. And it's here to stay. Some people say it's in infancy, pre.com bubble. I just wanted to get your take on it, because I give you my personal opinion. I think it's here to stay, and I think that it's got a big future. And in things like smart contracts, buying properties from each other, fractional ownership. And I'm just trying to work out in my mind what the lending space would be as well using this blockchain technology. But it'd be interesting to hear your take on it all.
So the controversial answer is it's a load of shit. The more nuanced answer is we're talking about a few different things wrapped into one. And like in fine dining, when you deconstruct something to its elements and you then let people taste the elements separate, or you sort of push together with your eating utensils to get different flavors. So what is crypto? And by the way, I worked on digital money before blockchain was invented. So I predate this, and most engineering comes down to what problem are you solving? It's rare that any new technology has been invented without a problem. I think lasers is the only real one that became sort of important that was invented without a purpose. We normally have a problem, we solve the problem. We have another problem, we solve the problem. So what problem is crypto solving? Well, the religiously aligned think it's solving problems that most people never have. So the take-up's going to be pretty minor. Now, is it a fad? Is it a Ponzi? Well, sort of. Tulip bulbs were like the fad that people made a lot of money with until they stopped. But tulip bulbs still have a purpose. They grow flowers. They look nice. It's blockchain as a distributed ledger has a purpose if someone uses it to keep track of stuff. We have distributed databases. Is blockchain an improvement? Maybe. There's some reasons that yes. There's some sort of problems maybe, but when it comes to digital money, what do we need digital money for? I have Apple Pay, I've got Android Pay, I've got Google Pay. What do I need this another digital money for? I don't have a transfer problem. I have TransferWise, right? Like what are you solving with this crypto thing? Oh, it's cheaper. It's like, really?
Not if you use gas fees with Ethereum.
Well, it's like, how much cheaper? There's lots of people. I buy a bottle of Diet Coke. Well, depending on where I buy it and how thirsty I am and how cold I want it, and did I want to have to buy a 2-liter at Asda and then go chill it? Or do I want to buy a 500 ml on a bike ride where I'm thirsty as shit and I want it cold? Well, it's the same thing, but I'm paying wildly different prices. So it's cheaper is not a problem. Most people don't have that problem. Oh, well, you can send money internationally. It's like, most people don't send money internationally. So you're solving a problem most people don't have. Big deal. And oh, by the way, I think I trust the Bank of England and the US Fed more than I trust you. And if they have a digital way to transfer money, I'll use theirs because I trust them, right? Or I'll use Apple Pay. I can send it to anybody who's got an iPhone. Fine. What do I need you for, right? So then you get into this, is it an asset to trade? Okay, fine. If enough idiots want to buy, I'll be a seller. That's sort of borrow market. If you sell them what they want and you buy it cheap and you sell it high and it may be strawberries, but who cares as long as there's a margin. Now, if you break the crypto space into the regulated sort of buckets, there's 3 types. There's currency or coin or money. That's one. There's another one, which is a utility token, which is essentially where you're going to get a membership. It gives you access. You're part of a club. Somehow there's a utility value, like living in a house. There's utility value of living in it, independent of what its value is economically. And then the last one is the security. It's a token, a fractional share, an ownership stake for a financial reward. Well, that third one's fully regulated. Call it a token if you like, it's still fully regulated. The SEC will come and squeeze your whatevers. And so will the FCA if you get into that. And that's why Telegram had to hand back $1 billion of token money they had raised through token sales because the SEC said, security offering without registration. Do you want to do the jail time now or do you want to do it later unless you hand all the money back? Okay. So $1 billion goes back. That didn't work so well. That wasn't very smart. Lawyers could have told them ahead of time, you will get arrested for this. You will have problems. Oh, it's a token. It's new. It's different. No, the regulations apply. You're just masquerading shares as tokens. Who the hell cares? It's a digital registered entry of a share of ownership. It's tokenization. That means fractionalization. That means it's been regulated for like 80 years. You just didn't bother reading. You're an idiot. Currencies are a belief system. If I believe this cigarette package called Marlboro that isn't open yet is more valuable than the thing that I want, or less valuable, then we'll do a deal. That is how Eastern European, German countries, Austria, whatever, traded and made commerce happen when they didn't trust the currencies after World War II. Like, are you kidding me? Unopened cigarette packages from America? Fine. And then eventually the note. So, oh, what's a fiat currency? It's something that's a belief system. What's crypto? It's a belief system. Oh, that's all fiat. The only nuance between fiat A and fiat B is whether there's a central authority or not. Well, who the hell cares? I trust the central authority more than the bozo IT folks. And I'm one of those IT folks. So crypto has a purpose if you say it is a utility for keeping a register of who owns this property. If the land registry uses blockchain to record it, fine. Now, here's the smart contract problem. If you're going to do a smart contract in a building, we're not doing any fractionalization per se. We're just going to do a smart contract. Well, I'm Asda or something. How do I pay you? Well, I get my bank account wherever they are, and I want to send money. How do I pay you? Well, you're going to send me these crypto things. Like, look, I sell stuff to people. They pay me in this thing called Bank of England notes or whatever. Okay, that's what I have a bunch of. And we set the rent to be sterling based. Okay, so if we have a smart contract, we got to move it from that sterling thing to in my account to you, that sterling thing in your account. How you then do what you do with it, fine. But there's this sort of intersection between the virtual smart contract and do I have the keys? Did I send the money? You know, it's not so easy to do a smart contract when you have to deal with people because people aren't smart contracts. So what are you going to trigger? So I see it as having a future. I'm a tech guy. Of course it has a future. Is it the future that the idiots think is? No. But that's okay. That happens all the time. All the tech is like that. People think stuff all the time. It turns out to be something different. Bill wrote some software that Tim wanted to use. So you and I end up with the web. That's not why Bill wrote it, but that's what happened. And that, by the way, just for those that care, Science Museum has Node 1 of the web, that next computer that Tim Berners-Lee actually used to have. It was on stage at the 2012 Olympics. It's at the Science Museum.
Is it in London?
Yeah.
That's good to know. I need to get down there. I've got an 11-year-old niece that I'm always telling her I need to take her to the Science Museum. So I'll look out for that.
You'll have to see if it's in public display. I don't know how they've arranged it, but I know they have it.
So based on your summary there, actually, to be fair, you summed it up at the end quite well. And you do believe it does have some sort of use, or it has some sort of future rather, but not necessarily in everything that people are talking about today. I mean, some of it now is crazy because it's like just meme coins.
This is sort of like S curves where we overestimate the impact. Then we have this period where like, oh, it's all shit. And then we sort of, it has a bigger impact than we ever imagined. It's a standard S curve for technology.
Yeah.
The problem with the term crypto is it's become quite a package of things. It's very similar to Brexit. Will Brexit be good in the end? I don't know. Will it be complicated during the middle? Yes, because there's lots of detail that's wrapped up into this. Yeah. But when you take back control, vote yes to Brexit. It's like, go crypto. It's like, whoa, what does that mean? Life is not that simple. I know a few people have been trying to do tokenization, property development. Someone tried to recruit me, and it's like, they still haven't cracked it. But it gets a little dangerous when they start doing ICOs, initial coin offerings, or other ways that people can invest. It's like, really be careful because it's been declared that you're moving into the securities side of it. You're trying to offer people a piece of all the development you're going to do. You're not even registered with the FCA yet. You don't even have an exchange or a platform to make this work. You're raising money to build that, but you're selling the vision here, but you're really only funding the exchange, which is a utility token because you don't want to be registered yet. It's like, so be honest with people.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that have done really well out of it and continue to do really well out of it, but I think that they don't really understand the space and they're just riding the wave.
Yeah.
And
all
it
boats
does
rise in a rising tide. And what's quite funny is they've done well in it when you measure it in fiat.
Yeah, because you've got to actually convert it back into fiat to have really any kind of value.
if you want the rest of us to think you did well, you have to put it in something we think is important.
But it is an interesting space, and I think that I'm hoping that we were talking about the smart contracts, and we were talking actually for a good 10-15 minutes before we jumped on about how and we mentioned it through the interview, how the conveyancing in the UK, the subject to contract thing, I'm hoping, I don't know how it would work, but I'm hoping that will be solved through some sort of smart contract, and we'd be able to package up information from one house sale to another in a much more of an efficient manner, rather than having the snail mail being passed around.
Yeah, part of that would definitely be improved if the actors in the play called conveyancing all had easy, quick access to the data. Now, the odd part is some of the delays actually with the councils, the searches that are not the things that would be held by the land registry. So if the land registry went to full blockchain smart contract and all the lawyers agreed to use it, they'd still be missing the things that cause the biggest delays. So then you'd have to get all the councils to do all their local search topics in the same thing. A different way to hear all that is if everybody just put their stuff into a digital database, maybe many databases that the lawyer could see at the same time, or the buyer could see, or the seller could see. You don't need blockchain and crypto or whatever we want to call it. You just need people to agree to put it online. And we see this with planning portals. It's a whole lot easier now that you can see the stuff online. There's no blockchain there.
But then this blockchain is like who controls that online portal, and if it's a blockchain, then this has all the various different nodes and all the very different computers. And
but why do I care about
decentralized?
Because I don't care about why do I care about decentralized? Well, I don't have a forgery problem if it's handled by the land registry. I have a forgery problem if the land registry takes corrupt input. But how do you know that the person sending in the name change or the title change is not the right person? So
this is definitely part 2 of our interview where we can pick up where we left off, because we have run out of time. John, I could speak to you all day in the same way that we probably not wasted, but I spent very valuable time with you offline, and it has been good for everybody else to share that time with you. We should do this again. In the meantime, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, catch up with you, what's the best way that they can find you?
So propertyfortress.com/ask-John. So ask-John or ask-John. That's ASK-JOHN. They can book a 20-minute call. We have a chat. Or you can probably find me through Facebook, probably more than anywhere else.
On all good property groups, you've always got good chat and engagement with.
Or they could reach out to you and you could book it in for them. There you go. Sam is my booking agent. There you go.
And I'm going to put the link in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, John. Life's great. It's always a pleasure. We'll catch up with you again sometime soon. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.